Welcome to the Stage Managers Association Holidays in July week of programming. Tonight we're discussing Remounting a Christmas Carol. Erin, do you want to talk us through some of the technological features?
Sure. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm your digital moderator today. A lot of you have been with us before, but if you have any questions, you can put them. This is a meeting format rather than a Q&A format. So put them right in the chat there, which if you haven't already pulled it up, you can hover over the bottom of your screen and you'll have the option to pull up your chat. And then I will be monitoring that and helping them if you have any questions, getting to them at the right time. If I don't think anybody's on the phone, but if you are, it's *9 to get our attention. And you are currently muted. I don't think we're going to do any kind of polls or anything. If we do that, then I can do those things later. If you do want to see side by side at the same time rather than having to move, we're not going to be showing very many slides, but there is an option under video settings at the top where it says you are viewing Katrina Herrmann's screen. Under view options, there's a couple choices of how to move things around if you want to do that. But pretty much all yours.
Great. And thank you, Erin, for reminding me to introduce myself. I'm Katrina, she, her. I'm based out of Chicago, and I will be your moderator for this evening. Today's panelists are Cheryl, Mintz, Alden, Vasquez, Talia, Krispel, and Rafi, Levavy, and I'm going to let the four of them introduce themselves. Cheryl, why don't you go first?
Hello, everyone. I'm Cheryl Mintz. Pre-COVID, I was the McCarter resident production stage manager, just finishing up my 29th season. For Spoleto Festival USA in Italy, I was Maestro Menotti's production stage manager over the course of 13 seasons. Early in the 1990s, I was a New York City Opera staff stage manager for 5 seasons. I have 6 Broadway shows to my credit, and I'm a director at large of the Stage Managers Association board. I've been on the board for 17 non-consecutive years. I'm also the chair of the Awards and Recognition Committee and the Del Hughes event. I just want to congratulate Alden on his Del Hughes honor upcoming this September before we get started. Congratulations, Alden. So in terms of Christmas Carol, I've been at the helm supervising McCarter's Christmas Carol for 26 seasons. We have done 3 different productions of basically the same adaptation by writer David Thompson. I'm up to, I believe, 699 performances, one shy of 700. Unfortunate that COVID hit right before 700. And over the course of my tenure since 1994, I've worked with 5.5 directors at the helm of the production. From 1991, the 1991 production was originated by director Scott Ellis with choreography by Rob Marshall. Taking over that production was Loretta Greco, then Patrick Lillis, and then Michael Unger. So that was a very interesting decade working with 4 different directors over that time period. In 2000, from 2000 to 2015, McCarter Theater reimagined our Christmas Carol, similar script. Michael Unger was the production director with Rob Ashford's choreography, an amazing design team of Ming Cho Lee, Stephen Strawbridge, and Jess Goldstein. In 1996, we did a huge reimagining and opening it up to much more community involvement at the helm of our then associate producer, Adam Imovar. Adam is the artistic director of Theater J in Washington, D.C., and he has been juggling McCarter's Christmas Carol these past 4 seasons, bringing in an associate, Jessica Bedford, to work with him when he is pulled back out to D.C. to artistic direct at Theater J. And that beautiful production is choreographed by Lauren Lataro, set designed by Daniel Osling. Linda Cho did the costume design. Darren West is our sound designer. So handing it off, I believe, to Alden.
Yes.
That's great, Cheryl. I'm Alden Vasquez. I've been a stage manager with the Goodmans since 1995. But I first interned on Christmas Carol in 1983. And then I joined the stage management team as an assistant in 1985 until 1989. Then I left Goodman Theater and took a year off, and then I came back and worked at Steppenwolf until 1995. In 1996, I was assigned again to be an assistant stage manager for A Christmas Carol. And then I assumed the production stage management position in 1998, and I've been the PSM up until 2019. And then I've done 2 Broadway shows. I've done about 13 productions at Steppenwolf. I've worked at Trinity Repertory Theater. I've done some stuff in Florida, American Stage Theater. In some small theaters in Chicago when I can get away from the Goodman. So I've been a stage manager.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Alden.
I'm gonna mute the other person.
I've been a stage manager for about 36 years. And currently for the first Christmas Carol, we've had 2 back we started Christmas Carol in 1978, and we've had 2 separate kind of productions. We had the first from 1978 to 1983. We had a Barbara Fields adaptation, and then since 1985 or 86 up until the present, we've used a Tom Creamer adaptation. I've worked with 7 directors. I've had about 4 or 5 ASMs on Christmas Carol. And we started our new version of Christmas Carol after we left the old building. And we used to be housed with the Art Institute in Chicago. And they kicked us out in 2000. And we built a new building downtown in the Loop in 1999, 2000. And so we had a brand new Christmas Carol in 2001. And we still have the current production. We've only changed the one major set was changed. We've had our current Scrooge is going to be with us for about 11 years. We've had, I think, 5 different Scrooges and countless children. Too many children, but so that's kind of my story. It's kind of short, but I enjoy Christmas Carol a lot. I look forward to it. This year will be my 30th year. Hopefully we will be doing a production, but you know, everything's up in the air. But hopefully we'll do something either on stage or in a streaming version this year for 2020. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you, Alden. Talia.
Hi, friends. My name is Talia Krispel, and I'm actually a bi-coastal stage manager. I live in New York City, but I also live in Los Angeles. I joined South Coast Repertory's production of A Christmas Carol in 2014 for their 35th annual production. And rumor is I'm the 4th stage manager. The other rumor is that I'm the 5th stage manager. Either way, there's not been many of us in the 40 years in which it's been running. I have only had one director with my production of Christmas Carol. He's been with it since the inception. John David Keller, he is one of the founding artists at South Coast Rep. And our Scrooge just recently retired in year 40. At the age of 78, and he did all 40 years. I want to say he missed maybe a handful of performances that we can count on one hand. So he clocked in well over, I believe we did the math, and it was well over 1,000 performances. I do have some of my former stage management interns on this call today, so they'll probably chime in with some fun facts throughout the call as well. So hello to you, my friends. I have been equity since 2004, so I am the baby of our lovely panelist groups. With our Christmas Carol, it is the same set, it is the same sound design, it is the same everything for 40 years. We've made very minor adjustments. Our current team, I want to say the majority of them have been with the show for at least 15 years. Our lighting team, Tom and Donna Ruzika, have been with it for all 40 years. And it's actually their wedding anniversary. So they always celebrate their wedding anniversary during every tech week that we have for Christmas Carol, which is fun. Tom Butterwitz is our current scenic designer, and he's been with the production, I believe, about 20 years. Drew Dalzell is our sound designer, and he's been with the company, I want to say, for about 10 years. So we have a good chunk of people that have been with the company through it's a good portion of its time. I'm considered the baby on the other side of the table, as I'm still the new one. We generally have the same actors as well. Our kids, of course, are rotated every year. We have 16 of them. We double cast. But the wonderful thing about our kids is that they are part of our acting conservatory at South Coast Rep. And so many of them will kind of grow through the show. So 1 year they'll be Tiny Tim, and 4 years later they may be a Belinda or a Martha, and then they may leave as Martha or another character before they age out of the youth acting conservatory program. And I think that that's a kind of a rough idea about South Coast. It sounds kind of boring compared to Cheryl and Alden, because we basically do the same thing every year. Our audiences know the show very well. So they will say all of the dialogue with all of the actors, which is fun. If one of my actors goes up, or if they decide to revert to a line that they said 20 years ago, the audience will complain that they changed the dialogue or whatnot. So that's always fun. But I have to show everybody. So I am wearing my South Coast t-shirt. Our director makes these t-shirts every year, and every year they are different. He does it out of the generous love of his heart. And he makes us t-shirts every year. So I now have 6 or 7 t-shirts in my drawers that all showcase a different year of Christmas Carol, and every year they are a different design. And so I had to wear mine today in honor of our Christmas in July. So thank you. And Rafi, off to you.
And actually, we have one clarifying question that came up in the private chat.
Yes,
just
please.
To clarify, he was playing Scrooge for all those 40 years, or did he do any other parts?
He was Scrooge. So it's Hal Landon Jr. So you all may know him if you ever watched some of my interns help me here. It's the Keanu Reeves movie that they're about to redo. What, Mom? Oh yes, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures. I love that my mom's on the call, y'all, so she's helping me out. So yes, he plays Keanu Reeves' dad. So y'all now have 2 degrees of separation to Keanu Reeves, which makes my heart very warm. But yes, so Hal, and thank you, Rachel, Bill and Ted, yes. So Hal played it the entire 40 years, and his joke was always that he now just doesn't have to wear makeup. So yeah, so unfortunately we're not doing Christmas Carol this year because of COVID. So I'm very glad that Hal got to leave last year and have a big celebration for his final year versus it being canceled and then potentially not being able to complete his final, retirement. So yeah, thank you. All right, Rafi, now off to you.
Okay, it's my turn. Hi, I'm Rafi Levavy. I have done A Christmas Carol with TheaterWorks USA 9 times, and I've done many, many more shows with them. For those of you that don't know, they're a company that tours TYA around the country, and I've been working with them for about 20 years. And they, in general, they when they mount a show, if they like it, if they keep it in rotation, or for however long they keep it in rotation, they generally try to remount the same or a very, very similar production. Different directors are given a little bit of freedom, but overall they're expected to remount the original production and put their personal their personal twang in if they feel it appropriate. And when I'm not working for TheaterWorks, I'm working for any other place that'll hire me, wherever, you know, whatever, you know, they've done a bunch of like SBT work and meet work, things like that. But TheaterWorks USA is my primary employer.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the slideshow so now we can actually look at everyone's faces while we start the conversation. Thank you.
And real quickly, because there are so many people who did turn off their video, if you want to, if they say, so you're not seeing just all these names, you can hover, I think it's over the top now, I can't find it, video settings, it should be. And yes, if you go to the bottom where you would stop your own video, then in video settings, there's an option to hide non-video participants. So the people who are showing their videos will be a little bit bigger to you. There's also a way to display up to 49 participants if you're having to scroll over left and right.
Thank you, Erin. After that wonderful introduction from all of our panelists, I'm so excited because everyone has a very different Christmas Carol, it sounds like. And again, we've got like 60 plus years worth of productions amongst the four of you, which is fantastic. But what all of you have in common is that you all stepped into a Christmas Carol that already existed. So each of you had the experience of being the new guy your first year, even if you weren't the new guy thereafter. Cheryl, do you want to start talking about what your first year was like when everyone else knew the show, but you didn't?
Sure. My first year was in 1994, and it was the 4th season of the production. And in the first 3 seasons, McCarter actually went through 4 production stage managers during the first 3 seasons. So you do the math. I won't get into whatever situation you're the production. But the year prior to me taking over the production, the impeccable Broadway stage manager, Susie Corden, brought it all together. And for those SMA members, Susie Corden received the Del Hughes Award many years ago. She was honored for her work and her lifetime achievement. But she had gotten the show running cleanly and tracking well. And I was aware that there was a history of scenery crashing through the sides walls of that production. And going into the production in 1994, it was a little nerve-wracking because we had a lot of, McCarter had a lot of challenges during those first 3 years. But at that time, I was with New York City Opera. And I have to say, during my time at City Opera, I learned what I like to call archaeological stage management. And I think that's the way I approach McCarter's Christmas Carol, walking into it, doing my research, digging deep into the production, understanding how it rolled, how it worked, what everyone's love for it was, what everyone's challenges were. And I didn't walk into it to try to reinvent the wheel. The crew had finally got comfortable with running a very difficult backstage production. And I respected that. And a main thing I did was meticulously rewriting Susie's calling script, because that was, I felt, the best way for me to wrap my head around the details. And the way that production in 1993 was called was actually describing every move. So the deck cues, the rail cues, the winch cues, everything was described, and then you said go. So that I wasn't dealing with cue numbers or cue letters except for sound cues and light cues, which quite frankly probably blows all of our minds on this webinar as stage managers, like, what do you mean? But I just decided I needed to be part of the culture that already existed at McCarter and not turn things upside down. And it went really, really well. A crazy thing was Steve Howe, who is our brilliant stage supervisor, who's been at McCarter close to 35 seasons. I said to him, listen, I need the cue light box in the rehearsal hall. So in the rehearsal hall at run-throughs, I was sitting there doing my choreography with the cue lights with my fingers, because it really was a very complicated call. I was talking nonstop for 2 hours, and he thought I was crazy until first tech. He also functioned as he recreated Peter Kazarovsky's lighting design. So he was out at the tech table with me. And I remember vividly when we went from Scrooge's bedroom into the schoolyard, into the Fezziwig office, which is always the most difficult set of transitions because we're dealing with an actor flying. It's our biggest scenic transitions. And I remember I did call those transitions perfectly the first time. And they had PTSD for the first 3 years. It was scenery crashing throughout the production and even during the run. So he just looked at me. He was like, oh my God. And I think that's when it cemented our relationship for the last 26 seasons. We've been coworkers. And I always kid around, if I ever got stuck on a desert island, I wouldn't want to be there with my husband. I'd want to be there with McCarter's sound engineer, Chris Woolley, Paul Kilsdonk, our lighting supervisor, Steve Howe, and our technical director, who's currently Alex Bergeron, because they're brilliant. And it was sort of a great experience going into it that first year. I'd say the biggest restructuring or signature of that first year in terms of putting my impact on it was probably reorganizing how the young ensemble was managed. That was a big overhaul in how we manage the young ensemble. I don't call them a children's ensemble. We don't call them child wrangling. They're not horses. They're a young ensemble. So that was my first year experience.
Wow, it sounds like you really brought a lot to McCarter, Cheryl, and that's why they've kept you for so long. Alden, can you speak to, you came and went from Christmas Carol, so your very first year and then your first year back.
Well, I have to say my first year was as an intern, and I was, I came from basically no experience. I never went to school for stage management. And I had done some dinner theater before I went to the Goodman. Or no, I'm sorry, I had was an apprentice at a summer stock theater before I went to the Goodman for my internship. And when I joined Christmas Carol in 1983, it was like their 6th year. The thing that blew my mind was, all the street scenes. It was a pretty simple concept. It had wagons that came in and out for each of for Fred's party, Cratchit's, Fezziwig, the office, just wagons that just rolled in and out. And but I remember the street scenes. The first day of staging the street scenes, the stage manager, I was under Chuck Henry and Melinda Degas, great stage managers, and Chuck Henry being a gentleman who is no longer with us, but who really was an inspiration to me and taught me a lot. He would hand out index cards to the actors to do the street scene. So for instance, the hat seller, you would enter stage left and go to the meat seller, and you'd sell them a hat, and then you exit stage right. And so everyone had their little assignments. So I kind of thought that's how, Christmas carols or any kind of show was staged. And when I joined as an intern, everyone in Christmas Carol had been with the show since since the first year. So there was a sense of family, and they all knew each other. They knew each other's, moods and strengths and weaknesses, and they all got along. And then in 84, they decided to kind of revamp the Christmas Carol and put it in the auditorium theater, and that didn't work out so well. So then I joined in 85 as an assistant stage manager, and we had a new director. They revamped they recast everybody except for Scrooge, and so the thing that struck out to me is that second year in 85 was that they kind of did away with that. They did away with the concept of this is what we did last year type thing. They always, and they continue to do so up until, until last year, that they approached each production as a new production. There was never, so when I had meetings with directors or new directors, it was, I would listen to what they wanted to change, or, they wanted to, they would tell me what their concept was and their vision was for that Christmas Carol. And so that was exciting to me that, we approach each production as a new production. Even though the majority of the cast would come in from the previous year. And that was as an assistant. So I came back with Joe Drummond as his assistant in 1985. And I remember, as an assistant, I was backstage and I checked the props and I ran the crew. And I remember one day he came to me and said, well, have you done your production book? And I said, or a calling script? And I said, why? And he says, well, you have to call the show. And I'm like, oh, no. I'm backstage. I'm gonna be with the crew and I'm gonna be with the actors and I'll check the props. And he goes, no. You're gonna call the show. So I was put in the hot seat very quickly. I did my calling script, but also, it's part of being in rehearsal, part of being tech, being on headset. I was able to listen to how he called the show. And I stood by him for about maybe a week, watching him call the show. And then my first time on a headset calling Christmas Carol was rather terrifying. I'm honest about it. I would go to the bathroom at the 5-minute call and, almost lose my lunch and because of nerves. But, the thing about Joe Drummond, he taught me about focus and concentration and, just have fun with it. And I did. And then when I moved up to production stage manager, I worked with Barbara Butts as her assistant when I came back from Steppenwolf. And I was her assistant for 2 years. And when I took over in, I think 98 or 99, we were still with the old production at the old building. And so I kind of was able to transition very easily to the PSM because, again, I knew the directors, the actors, Scrooge, but then the new building came in and we had a brand new production with a new director. And being the PSM, you're in the hot seat. I remember telling all my assistants, if their first year of being my assistant, I would feel bad for them because they would be, and I would tell them, first day of rehearsal, the bus is running, we got to drive the bus. And there's a lot to learn. Sometimes they're a little overwhelmed, and my job was to kind of keep them in the straight and narrow and just not be overwhelmed by all the tech elements and the 25 to 29 actors on stage. But being a PSM was for me another transition. It was being out in the house with the designers. We had great designers. We had a wonderful lighting designer, Bob Christian, who's no longer with us, who was the original lighting designer up until 2012. And then we've had Heidi McMath, who's our costume designer, Todd Rosenthal, who's our set designer since 2001. And we've had our current sound designer has been with us for about 7 or 8 years, Richard Woodbury. But just going into the new production, we have flying for the first time. It's very tech heavy. We have flying, we have sound effects, but we also have, going along with the concept of, we're gonna, every year we make a little adjustments, whether it's casting or some kind of technical elements. We have these wagons, again, that come on stage, but they're designed in a way that the blocking is just, you have to do this, you almost have to do the same kind of blocking every year because of the constraints of the sets. But we try to tinker with it. We tinker with the script still. And with casting, for instance, nephew Fred became niece Frida about 4 or 5 years ago. You know, we changed genders for Ghosts of Christmas Present and for Past. So, you know, we according to the directors, you know, I've had 7 directors, and each one will come in with their own style and concept, and that I like, that I respect. I'm not the one to, they all understand that I've been around for a long time, and my job is to support them. And I sit there and I don't do the, well, we did this last year and it has to be done. I listen, I adjust to what their changes are. And it makes it my job, makes their job interesting, my job interesting to watch each production change, even though it's, you know, they tinker with it with just a little bit. But yeah, we have what, 6 kids. We don't double cast. We're very responsible about childcare, child welfare. We have a young performance supervisor who's attached to them. We don't let the adults mingle with them. We have strict rules. And we do some fun stuff. Earlier we talked about the walk-ons. So if you have $10,000 to donate to the theater, you can walk on our stage in costume for Christmas Carol. And we do a little rehearsal with you, and we assign you to an actor, that person to an actor, and they get to walk on our stage for about 15 to 20 seconds and do a curtain call, and it's fun for them. And we take pictures and we do tours, and we try to make it a very positive experience for them. And you know, we also do it for, you know, anybody who wants to tour the set, you know, friends, family, and sometimes just patrons who ask to go backstage. We do that for them. So
what scene are they put in?
They're doing street scenes. We used to put them in the Fezziwig dance and put them, like, stick them in a corner so they wouldn't get run over. But then it became a costume issue. But it's mostly street scenes and the curtain call.
Do they have more than one entrance?
Yes, they have about 3.
That definitely makes it exciting.
It is.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Alden. Talia, you kind of had the exact opposite experience where everyone knows the show inside and out, and you come in and you're the new kid.
Yeah, so I was taking notes because Cheryl and Alden were like sparking memories of kind of taking me back to my first year at Christmas Carol with South Coast. So I remember the first day that I walked into the offices and everyone, you know, shaking my hand, which feels weird now. You know, hi, Talia, we're so happy to have you. FYI, Christmas Carol is a beast and you've missed the train, basically, right? And everyone was like, it's a speeding train, it's a speeding train, it's a speeding train. And I'm like, well, I'm at like a turtle's pace trying to catch said speeding train. Like you said, Katrina, we have a lot of returning actors. And so even though we only have one director, we have actors, Scrooge, our Ghost of Christmas Past, the character that plays, we have a character, Joe, Cider Cart Man. They've all been with the show for 40 years and they all have opinions and they all want to tell me what their opinions are, whether it be, this is where I want this cue called, this is when I enter here, this is when I do this. So I was frantically trying to keep up with all of those notes along with what the rest of the SCR staff was telling me. We tried to, I remember in our prep week, my ASM and I, with our interns, tried to sit down and watch our archive. But our show, probably most, as many of you guys, it's pretty dark for the majority of the show. And with our set is also very dark. So you can't really see anything, but you can hear it. Because the decking on our main stage show is the Christmas Carol decking. It's the original decking, and every show that comes in outside of Christmas Carol is laid on top of our deck. So they will get a fresh deck on top of our deck, which basically, and all of our show is human power. We have no automation. Tom Butterwitz tried to get them to do automation, and they said, no, we want to keep it the way that it was when we first created it in 1979. So we have these huge like grooves that all of our wagons are on. We have 2 wagons, one stage left, one stage right, that have walls that can detach and swap out to go from the office or Fred's party or the Cratchit house. And then we have the bed chamber, which is huge and takes up basically the entire stage, that lives upstage when it's not in play, and then when it comes downstage, it comes all the way down to the portal. So as we were watching the archive video, my assistant was like, okay, so you hear that? That's the bed chamber moving. And then suddenly you would see it. So it was a lot of that kind of talking through. And I just remember my head swirling, and they had recorded the stage manager prior to me. They had recorded him calling the show. So they put it to a CD and they were like, here, listen to the call of the show. So as I drove to and from my mom's house to South Coast, which is about a 30-mile drive, I would listen to the previous PSM calling the show. I had no idea what was happening because I really hadn't seen it because the archive was so dark. I maybe saw 25% of the actual show on the archive. So I was listening to this, random call, what it seemed like to be random, right? And then I would and then I had the call script with me in rehearsal, and I was trying to pay attention to the calls as we were in rehearsal. But when we get into tech at South Coast, it's not a traditional tech. We basically do 8 out of 10s. Woohoo! 8 out of 10s, no 10 out of 12s. Because the majority of my company at that point is over the age of 70. So they tend to tucker out even well before we hit the 8 out of 10 mark. So tech is essentially for 90% of the cast and crew, because the majority of the crew when I started had been there for 10, 20 years. So thank God, because they knew the show and they were like, Talia, don't worry about it. We got you. Just learn the call and we'll take care of you. And I was like, whew, okay. So when we get into tech, it's 8 out of 10s, but it's basically a put-in for anybody that's new. And at that point, it was generally our young ensemble that was new, along with our 4 non-equity adult actors. And so we would only stop for those friends when we got to their scenes, mainly for the young performers, for safety, because we wanted to make sure that they weren't getting, completely clobbered by the office, which comes together and crashes right out of the first street scene. And so we would only stop for the kids. We would only stop for their quick changes and things of that nature. So when they say it's like a bullet train, it literally is a bullet train. And so I remember sitting there calling the first sequences with my production manager sitting directly behind me. And I probably said over headset multiple times, y'all, you got to stick with me, Lord save me. Because I was calling things in real time that I had no idea what I was looking for. And as we all know, a lot of stage management cues are off of visuals, but I had no idea what I was looking for. But because it was so brand new to me, my face was in the book the entire time. And I was like, I can't look up because I don't know what I'm looking for. So my production manager was helping me call during tech and was giving me notes as I was calling. And there was one time, so coming out of the first office scene, or coming out of the office scene, going into the first street scene, as Scrooge has left the offices and going to his bedchamber before Marley enters, we have our scrim comes in so that we can bring the bedchamber down to the scrim and have it prepped. Well, again, not being able to really watch anything, with my cue lights, Cheryl, I wish I would have done what you did and demanded cue lights in the rehearsal room, but I didn't. And I flipped a cue light and I glance up, and my rail, she was teaching me a lesson. She could see that Hal was directly under said scrim, but she stopped it right above so that I could see that I almost hit Hal Landon Jr. And so I am now traumatized. So whenever I watch that sequence, it is now completely memorized because I refuse to ever be in that position again. And whenever we get a new actor that has a moment with Scrooge and then they stomp upstage, I'm like, a scrim flies in and I will not hit you. So I have that horrible memory of people, yelling at me. And I actually there was an article written in the Los Angeles Times about me almost hitting Hal Landon in the head with a scrim. So that is forever emblazoned in my career history. I'm referring to my notes here. So yeah, and the other fun part is I was handed the script. It was a Word document, color coded, everything was done for me. But we realized when we got to intermission going into the top of Act 2 that I had been given an old script. And so we had teched all of Act 1 with an old script. Thankfully, because our show had been running for 35 years, very little of it had changed. But the top of Act 2, where we have wanton ignorance, slightly changed because our director liked to change things up every year just to keep the audience on their toes. And it was generally around wanton ignorance and how they would enter, whether it would be from a trap in the floor or from his bed or from a window or things of that nature. So we discovered that going into Act 2 that I had been teching from the wrong script. So I then teched all of Act 2 with 2 scripts in my hand, having to look at both, never being able to see the stage. So it was quite frightening. So Alden, you were talking about like walk-ons. And I was like, well, we've never had a walk-on. Like, we don't do that. And then I remembered. Our walk-on donated $5 million to walk on.
I'm sorry.
Julian,
You just have $5 million and you're like, here, I don't need $5 million.
Yeah, so she's walked on twice. So in the 35th anniversary, she donated $2 million the current, Martin Benson and David Ems, who are the co-founders of South Coast Rep, said, how can we ever repay you? And she said, I want to be in A Christmas Carol. So my director stood up at this gala and said, what role do you want to play for $2 million? Like, hello, what role do you want? And her response was, well, I just want to be pretty. But my director wanted to make her a scavenger because she's Julianne Argyris is her name. She is huge in the Orange County area. Her and her husband are real estate moguls. Our smaller space at South Coast Rep is the Julianne Argyris stage, named after her because of all the donations that she gives. She has the Argyris Plaza, which is right next to the Segerstrom Center for the Arts, for those of you that do touring. So if you ever hit Southern California, especially the Orange County area, you're gonna see 2 names. You're going to see Segerstrom or some people pronounce it Segerstrom, or you're going to see Argyris. And so you'll then now know that Julianne Argyris has a ton of money and just likes to donate it to South Coast. Thank you, Julianne. So she was our first walk-on. And so my director wanted to make her a scavenger, but she didn't want to because she wanted to be pretty. So our costume designer, who unfortunately is no longer with us, Richard Odell, had a dress hand-built for her. And then they gifted her the dress afterwards. And it was this most stunning purple gown. So she was a rich lady. So she was on our first street scene, escorted by our director. And then she was in Fred's party as one of the characters. And we gave her lines, which was, if we took shots, like it could have been a drinking game with if she was going to make her line or not. And so we all thought we had forgotten about her. And then for the 40th anniversary, she donated, they invited her back. And she did 2 performances. And after each performance on her stage next door, the smaller space in the Argyris, she held 2 parties and hosted her 50 plus guests. I want to say it was like 50 to 75 people. It was fully catered by her personal caterer and her personal cook. She came in her gown and greeted everybody and thanked everybody. And on her final performance, she announced to all of South Coast, because the artistic director was there, our managing director was there, our cast, crew, everybody was there. She announced that she was donating $5 million to South Coast. So that is how Julianne Argyris got to be a walk-on in our show. But in my time, she's been the only one that's done a walk-on. She is a lovely, lovely woman. But it's crazy trying to throw people into a show. We don't have understudies at South Coast because we're on a LORC contract, so we are not required to have understudies, so we do not have them. And because of the fast pace in which we move, we essentially are almost like on a pseudo summer stock schedule. We rehearse for 2 weeks, then we go into tech, and then it's full speed ahead, and then we run for 4 or 5 weeks. And so rearranging schedules to fit in Julianne Argyris is always a task, but when she says that she wants to keep our company and the arts alive in the Southern California region, we do not say no, we say thank you. Her favorite gift to give is C's chocolate, you know, like those 2-pound boxes of chocolate. So the second time she remembered me coming back for the 40th anniversary, and she remembered that I loved C's candy. So I would get my own 2-pound box. So I'm shocked that I'm still the same size I am after the endless supply of 2-pound box of C's candy. So yeah, that's my crazy speed train going into Christmas Carol. But now I can actually see, like I've done it for 6 years. I can now probably call it blindfolded or with my eyes closed, and I'm actually seeing things for the first time because I can actually look up from my script, which is always fun. So yeah.
That's a great story. And thank you to Julianne Argyris, and may every theater company find their own Julianne Argyris to keep us going when we come out of COVID, because we're going to need her and all of her friends. And on behalf of artistic directors everywhere, we will give her dress if she will just give theaters $5 million.
And fun last tidbit, she did keep the dress that Richard Odell made for her. So it made a reappearance in her reunion performance 5 years later. And I believe she still has the dress. So, yeah.
Well, I don't blame her. I would keep it. Rafi, I'm so excited because you have a completely different Christmas Carol. So
I have a very different experience than my colleagues there. Yes.
Can you explain not only Christmas Carol but also what a TheaterWorks tour is?
Sure. It's most of the shows have 6 actors, and some of them nowadays have 5, but generally it's 6 actors / ASMs, 1 stage manager, and two vans and a lot of cheap hotels is basically what TheaterWorks is. It's the 6 actors, or however many actors, but usually 6, and 1 stage manager. Just drive around. You do shows during most of the performances are for school audiences, either in schools or in theaters, and they would come to us as field trips. And so we do the shows typically in the morning, sometimes early afternoon, and then we break the set down and load out and drive on to the next place, and then the next morning do it all over again. Sometimes there are weekend or evening performances for families, but I would say a good 95% or more of the shows are during the school day. And to go back to your original question about being the new guy on A Christmas Carol, with the way TheaterWorks works is they basically are, with everything, not just A Christmas Carol, they're just a well-oiled machine in terms of remounting the shows that they've already done. So being the new guy really didn't mean too much more than anything else with TheaterWorks. They hired before my time, they hired a director to direct the production, and he did it. And one of the actors that was in that production for years and years would remount the show until about 3 years ago. He almost literally remounted every production of it, and my first year, my first year doing it, they actually used to send out 2 companies of it, and he would generally do both. And just like Talia, it has a 2-week rehearsal process, except the second week of one company was the first week of another company, and he would basically bounce back and forth between rehearsal rooms during that week. So it's all, scheduling that week was always interesting. And the first year that I did it, he actually did not, he directed the other version, but the other production, but not the one that I did. And so there was someone else who was also in the original production with him. So she knew the show just as well, and she was perfectly competent at directing it. She didn't consider herself a director at all. She considered herself an actor, but she sometimes contributed with Christmas Carol. And out of the 6 actors, 4 of them had done the show before. And I think all 4 of them, as I recall, had done it together the year before. So they kind of knew the show and each other. And then the 2 actors and I were the new folks kind of playing catch up. And then I think 6 times that I've done it subsequently, that person who directed most of them, he directed the show, and he could direct that show in his sleep. He knew that show backwards, forwards, and sideways, and then he kind of moved on from doing that show a few years ago, and so they brought someone in who had no prior connection to the show. And when they brought her in, they also, for the first time in my experience, had a cast of folks who had never done the show before. And so the director wanted very much to leave her own stamp on it, and did as much as she could and as much as she was allowed to in terms of doing that. But she wanted me to like make note of when things were different, because I had no way of knowing if she was changing things intentionally or unintentionally. So she wanted me to make note and kind of talk to her afterwards. And then if she felt it was something that she wanted to revert back, she would go back the next day and change it. So it was always interesting kind of doing things twice in 2 days instead of once and then moving forward. And yeah, and then I did the show with her twice, and then she did it one time 2 years ago. Was the last time TheaterWorks has done the show, and she did the show then, and I was not involved in that production. And then they didn't do the show last year, and they're obviously not doing it this year. At least partially because of COVID. I don't know if they would have done it if it wasn't for COVID, since they didn't do it last year. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And how do you keep the show fresh if you're doing the show 10 times a week, 12 times a week?
Honestly, I just by giving notes as appropriate. It's just, I mean, I basically, the way no different than any other show. I know when some like resident theaters do Christmas Carol, I think they add extra shows because it's such a popular ticket. With us, it's with this, it's really no different than any other show. Some days we'd have 4 shows a week. Some days we'd have 9 or 10, and it either stayed fresh, or I would give notes or run or go over, rehearse little things and say, this is kind of you're falling, I can see you falling asleep here. Stay with it mentally, not just physically. And usually they get my point and take the note. And the great thing about Christmas Carol in terms of that is it's such a short run. No one wants to see a Christmas Carol before Thanksgiving or after Christmas. So very rarely do Christmas Carols have runs of longer than 5 or 6 weeks. And so there's less of a chance for that show to get stale than longer running shows.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go in reverse order. Talia, how do you keep the show fresh when you've got a cast that's been doing it for literally 40 years?
Well, and I say this with all due respect, they're older. So the keeping of the freshness is reminding them what they did the previous year and reminding them what their dialogue is. For the most part, there are certain sections of the show that is in their muscle memory. And then for whatever reason, they'll hit a certain part of the show and it just leaves their brain. But much like Rafi said, it's really just about upholding the notes. Up until last year, my director was also in the show. He played Mr. Fezziwig. But last year, he was not in the show. He also retired after 40 years. And my Ghost of Christmas Past, who's been in the show for 39 years, one of the co-founding actors of South Coast, was going to step into the role of Scrooge for this year. We've now pushed it to next year. We're going to do this version of it one more year, and then South Coast is going to revamp and do something new and flashy. Rachel's shaking her hands because she works with me at South Coast. So yeah, it's really just about giving the notes. It did help having the director in the show because he would watch sections of it. But the joy that my company has coming together every year, it is such a joyous reunion for them that they have so much fun doing the show, that it's luckily for them, because they know the tradition that it has created at South Coast. They kind of find that they keep that freshness within themselves. So it actually is quite easy for me because I don't have to do it as often as I do on some other productions. And the beautiful thing about our show, being that it's been running since the birth of dirt, as I like to say, we get a lot of notes from audience members. You know, my grandparents used to take me to the show every holiday season. Now I'm bringing my children, or we'll get requests for people to come backstage, and they'll, you know, and I hear, you know, Scrooge and our Bob Cratchit and all of them start screaming, and I'm like, what's happening? And, oh, they were a Tiny Tim in 1983, and now that, you know, so I think kind of that history that comes with our production keeps them alive while they're on stage. And so it's actually our core group of like principal performers. They are so consistent that I can tell when something is wrong based on like how Scrooge puts on his pants. He's a left legger first. If he puts on his right leg first, something's going on. So it's like those little things that I've learned now that I can actually watch the show and not have my face in a book. That those are those little things that I can tell if something's going on that signals me to check in or have somebody else, you know, one of my other stage managers check in with them. But they make it quite easy for me on this show. So.
Nice. Alden, how do you keep it fresh for yourself when you've been doing it for over 29 productions, 30 productions?
Well, you know, when I'm not calling the show, I'm in the house watching every show. And that's kind of my thing. I can't, for me personally, I can't be away from the show. Usually, and also during the fly sequence, I'm backstage. I watch the fly sequence backstage in case something happens. I can, you know, give the order to stop the show and try to solve any problems. But in the house, I'm taking notes. I'm watching for, you know, embellishments. I'm watching for energy and pace, enunciation, all the kind of the basic things that I need to watch. And because I know the show so well, you know, I know when the audience is not understanding, especially with accents, when they're not understanding what the storytelling is about. So I give notes on enunciation. I said, I can't hear you, or you know, you need to project more. And I call brush ups for Fezziwig dances, keep it fresh. I have a dance captain who gives notes. But
is that rehearsal a separate rehearsal, or is that just before half hour?
Before half hour. Yeah, we spend a half hour. We run the dances. We kind of run the Fezziwig scene, and then if I have time, I use that time to put in the covers. The two, a male and a female, to cover the dances. So that's what I'm watching for. You know, it's 9 shows. We do 9 shows a week, and so I can't let it get out of control, because sometimes, you know, like Talia was saying, you know, people have been with the show for a long time. They know each other, and especially toward the end of the run, when people start getting tired and bored, they'll start, you know, they go into like automatic pilot. And so my job is to kind of say, you got to pop out of that automatic pilot and tell the story. And also they're there to support Scrooge. You know, Scrooge is the one has the through line, never leaves the stage, and they need to, in a way, like one of the directors said to the company one time, is that you're there to listen and kind of move Scrooge along the story. That's what your job is, to move Scrooge along into the story. So that's what's in my head when I'm watching the show, is to make sure everyone is supporting him and moving him along in the story. So that, and that's how I keep it fresh. It's you know, I'm not, I give notes to Scrooge, and of course the current Scrooge we have will give me notes to give to the company, and we discuss it, and you know, we find out if it's a valid note or stuff. But yeah, I'm always giving notes. I've got to keep, you know, it's like I said, it's 9 shows a week. We're in a basement, and I got to keep it together. I got to keep the company together and not let things get out of hand. So that's how I do it.
Yeah. Cheryl, do you have tricks for keeping it going?
Well, I think I want to reflect back to McCarter in terms of all of us, the whole organization, how we keep it fresh. Because it's not just my show. It belongs to the whole theater. And I feel it really goes back, especially to Adam, our current director, and Michael, our previous director, is actor turnover. So I would say we have about a 50% of our principals might be new or take a year or two off and then come back to the production. So I feel very much new cast member and cast turnover is the key to keeping the production fresh. The brilliant thing with Adam is we go through a complete rehearsal process like it was, you know, a new production every year. It's not shortchanged. So we have a complete production rehearsal experience, a full tech experience. So it never feels like it's a put-in for any new company member. Tech is always broken down. Sometimes we do a sweep and we make sure everyone's ready to do that sweep. But we really try to give every new company member their own journey into the play. And I think through that, it is so strongly directed up front that during our 3-week run, well, with the new production, we've done 4 weeks again to make that extra week of income. But generally over the 30 plus years that Christmas Carol has been at McCarter Theater, our runs are generally 24 to 33 performances over the course of 3 weeks, depending on how the calendar falls between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I don't run into huge veering off the track. It's a very strong equity company. Adam pulls his actors from DC, casting from Philly and New York City. I really feel like we have a troupe of Adam Imivar actors that one might miss 1 year and come back another year. We had the same thing with Michael Unger's productions. We had one Christmas present, and she always would joke around that she only performed in the odd years. So she was like present in 2007, 2009, 2011. And all those things add to keeping it fresh. Currently, we have 49 people in our cast. We have a community ensemble of 24 local non-professional actors who bring everyone into the journey through a lobby pre-show, which was the major restructuring of this new version. Adam's idea of it being very community-based. When the audience walks in, they are immersed in the production. The community ensemble is out doing a lobby pre-show 1 hour prior to the start of the actual 2-hour production. Our equity company of 11 company members, and we have 2 non-pros who play principal roles, are just very finely tuned, and they are very well disciplined great at their crafts actors. Greg Wood, who plays our Scrooge currently, is so precise, it is mind-boggling. And Adam said to us going in our first year that, I mean, Greg delivers such an incredibly precise show. He doesn't veer off track except to go deeper. So that has been a real pleasure dealing with that. And our 12 young ensemble members, we have 6 boys and 6 girls. None of them are double cast. They perform in every performance, and they're just very well taken care of and get a lot of direction from our assistant directing team and the young ensemble manager. So I haven't found these, I don't have any horrible war stories about actors going rogue, not even our community actors. It is impossible to, with the community ensemble doing their 1 hour pre-show, it is very hard. If we have to make adjustments to the Fezziwig dance, often we go over it with our equity actors and we have to rehearse the community ensemble separately, but it always seems to work out because you can't sort of do those emergency pickup rehearsals prior to half hour because our community ensemble's out in the lobby doing the lobby pre-show. So that is slightly dangerous with our current production. If we have an emergency, it's kind of hard to orchestrate a quick rehearsal prior to half hour. But yeah, I think just the theater keeps the show in great shape. Our prop master, Michelle Samarco, and our costume manager, Cynthia Tom, I mean, they run such a tight ship, and props and costumes are so beautifully maintained that it's the whole theater keeps the show fresh and running beautifully.
That's so lovely. And while I'm listening to all of you describe your Christmas carols, what's striking me is that it seems like the consistency is what brings the audience back. The audience loves knowing that every Christmas they come and they see Christmas Carol and it's a tradition, and that theaters do that because of the money, right? But also we as theater makers enjoy that consistency because it's the one time in the year where you know you're definitely, well, as a freelancer, definitely going to be employed. I'm definitely going to have the show, but then I also get the consistency to always go back to people that I know that I love working with, which as a freelancer, I don't always know that the next show is going to be as warm and special as I can count on maybe Christmas Carol being. And so I'm just wondering, following up on that, what are the traditions that you have formed as part of this company that comes together every year that gets to, Alden, it looks like you've got something.
Well, we have a potluck dinner. You know, I think we always try to have it on the 23rd of December before Christmas. It's you know, we become like a family. I mean, it's like I said, we do 9 shows a week. We're in a basement. It's a tough schedule. We do the potluck. We also do cakes for birthdays. We used to do a dressing room decorating contest until it got out of hand, and we had to kind of put the squash on it because it started becoming performance art and would take away from what they were supposed to be there for. But, you know, it's, we celebrate the children. We do things like we do intern appreciation day. We do understudy appreciation day. I make it so that, you know, when they come to the theater, you know, on a Tuesday and they've got 9 shows ahead of them, it's going to be, it's work, but it's going to be fun, and we're together. It's like we're all in this together, you know. It's like I said, it's a grueling schedule, and we all look forward to the potluck. The Goodman Theater on a Saturday between shows will provide dinner. Sometimes the cast, one of the cast members, his wife will. We had one cast member whose wife owned a catering company, and she provided meals for us for between shows. So we, you know, we do Secret Santa, and we involve the kids. you know, I like to keep it light. We're like a big family. I mean, you know, we respect each other. We love each other. We bicker. I mean, you know, it's like a big family. It's a little sometimes dysfunctional, but we get along. And especially for the kids, you know, I always tell the parents that I want their young performer to leave A Christmas Carol as a positive experience. And that's sometimes in my head when I want everybody to leave this on closing night. I want everyone would like everyone to look back and say, this is a very positive experience. And so I go all out for making everybody comfortable, wanted, loved. It's schmaltzy, but you know, everyone appreciates it. And I think it makes the run a lot easier. Going back to, we rehearse 3 weeks. We rehearse 3 weeks. If we have a new screw, just 4 weeks. We have a week of tech. We tech on a Tuesday. We first preview Saturday night, and then we do 9 to 10 previews, and then we open. So it's a long run. And then we run 5 weeks, and it's 9 shows a week. And so, like I said, the bus takes off first day of rehearsal. So it's my job to set the tone on the first day of rehearsal and make everyone feel welcome. And it's like a big family reunion, and it works for us. So yeah, that's it.
I love that. Cheryl?
Yeah, just because I'm getting bombarded in private chat here. We have Silly Hat Day and Wear Your Pajamas to Work Day. We usually do that on the first and second Sunday of rehearsal and take a photo. We have the Great Tape Peel Up, which in 1994, when we were moving out of the rehearsal hall my first year, and let me just tell you, Christmas Carol right now, it's run, in terms of stage management, it's like butter, it's clockwork. But that first year, the thought of even breaking down the rehearsal hall that night just sent me over the edge. And I looked at the young ensemble and I split them up into teams and we timed it, and it was a competition, and it got called the Great Tape Peel Up. And we've done that for 26 years. And whichever group has we put it on the postage scale to see which one weighs the most. And it's a really big deal for the kids, that tape peel up. And that has turned into a really great tradition. And I look at it as one of my genius moves 26 years ago. Something that's very near and dear to my heart is celebrating 100th performances. I've kind of become the keeper of how many performances each actor has done, because it varies. They might have been sick and missed a performance their first year. So it might not fall on the exact same day as somebody else who's done the same time period. But we mark 100th performances with a gathering, and each company member who hits their 100th gets a framed photo of themselves that's inscribed. So that's always a special moment. We have parent-hosted opening weekend dinners, Secret Santa. I've tried to find out on Facebook. We get up to about 60 people participating in our Secret Santa. So it's quite a masterful week backstage. And that definitely, if you're talking about how we keep things fresh on stage, what happens backstage and downstairs helps what's happening on stage. And I really feel Secret Santa always falls right there in the middle of the run and lifts up everyone's spirit. We do a holiday dinner. Community ensemble hosts a potluck. We have a closing toast party. And a tradition that was started in 1994 by composer and writer Polly Penn, who played Mrs. Dilber that year, is she created something known as the Old Joe Award. And since then, I've also started what we know as the Junior Joey, and those are sportsmanship awards. So if, like when David Kenner had to leave the production for a family emergency for a week, Jimmy Ludwig, who was playing Uncle Fred, and the undertaker took over the role of young Scrooge because it's actually logistically possible. So for example, that year when he came to the rescue, he won the Old Joe Award. So it's more of a sportsmanship award, and it can go to a crew member, it can go to a young ensemble member, a community member, or an equity actor. So those are some of our very fond traditions.
That sounds so delightful. Talia?
First and foremost, Alden and Cheryl, I'm taking notes of what to steal and call it the Alden such and such or the Cheryl. So Cheryl, with the tape peel up, we don't make it a contest, but you bet your bottom dollar it is now going to be the Cheryl Mintz tape peel up contest. We do a lot of the same things. We do Secret Santa. We do cakes for birthdays. We decorate our call board with Christmas lights, with tinsel. We decorate our green room as well. One of my personal favorite traditions is not something that we as a cast do, but it's what my technical director does. So our tech week is the week of Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is our day off. And when we come back Friday morning to finish our last block of rehearsal before a performance that evening, our first preview that evening, our entire backstage hallway is covered in Christmas lights and on the ceiling. So he comes in at God knows what hour. I don't even think he leaves the theater because he's always there, it feels like. But we come backstage to find a wonderful collection of Christmas lights, which is really fun. And he does that every year. One of our newest traditions that we've started doing is to kind of keep our young ensemble occupied or give them kind of a focal point, is we will play games backstage where we will hide like a little reindeer in the green room and they have to find it, or they have to do like a snowball fight. So it's like, you know, little puffy balls of whatever that we find and they have to throw it into a cup. It's probably much like beer pong, but for kids, right? So it's probably where we got the idea, to be honest. But my favorite is the prize is that they get to choose any costume of their desire, and then they get to put it on and walk around backstage to show everyone, and then we will take photos, and of course. And one year, my Hal Landon Jr.'s granddaughter played Tiny Tim, and she won the game that year. And so her desire was to put on Scrooge's nightgown and nightcap. So of course it's swimming off of her, and there's a wonderful picture of her with Hal where he is in his suit garb and she's, you know, drowning in this nightgown with the cap like sitting down to here, and you know, so that's probably one of my favorite newer traditions. And then my director also hosts a party at his house the Sunday before we close every year, and he has it catered, and he welcomes all of the parents, all of the crew, the entire South Coast rep staff. So in his little cottage, it gets quite packed, but we do that every year. So yeah, so we have kind of similar traditions, but I just wanted to say that I took great note during
I just want to add something because that Talia reminded me of. At the end of our rehearsal process, before we move into the theater, the stage management and the directing assistants, it takes us about 6 or 7 hours to set up dressing rooms for wardrobe to do their load in. And we actually decorate each person's dressing room with lights and ornaments and decoration, classy decorations, because we want it to be magical when the actors step into that dressing room the first time. It's incredibly exciting, I know, for the community ensemble and the young ensemble to walk into that dressing room with the Christmas lights on, with the principals. There's a rose and a bud vase on each of their dressing tables. And that's another tradition that we've done. And it's packed up we have boxes that say dressing room 1, dressing room 2, dressing room 3, and every year those decorations are taken out. It's a lot of work, I'd say, for our staff, but I think it's worth it in terms of creating a really special place to do the art.
And Rachel just reminded me that yes, so stage management and the crew go every year across the street to South Coast Plaza, which is a huge mall, and we go find Santa, and we all take a picture with Santa every year. And then we I generally treat, and we'll pay, so everybody gets a hard copy of the photo. We'll also do digital copies, and then we will hang a copy of Crew with Santa on one of our Crew fridges every year, which is fun too.
And we celebrate Hanukkah as well. Hanukkah, Kwanzaa.
Celebrate them all.
Yeah, candle lighting every night.
Rafi, I know that your company comes together for a short amount of time. So
Yeah.
if you don't have any traditions, I still want you to talk about fan mail.
Fan mail. So, yeah, because we don't really have traditions. One thing that sort of has become a small scale tradition with the Christmas carols that I do is I tend to be the only Jew in the companies of Christmas Carol that I've done. And I do it, while Hanukkah is not a particularly important holiday in the Jewish calendar, I do enjoy lighting the candles every night. And the non-Jewish actors, more often than not, enjoy coming into my room, my hotel room, and participating with me on that. And sometimes when actors return, they say, "Did you bring your menorah this year?" Yeah, so they start looking forward to that. But fan mail. So as I mentioned, the audiences are primarily school age and during school hours. And so often the teachers will have the kids write us thank you letters, which more often than not, obviously, is really more drawings and, thank you for coming, and then a drawing of like Scrooge and Tiny Tim or something. And they're really adorable. And it doesn't happen that often, but it tends to happen probably like 2 or 3 times in a contract. And and so each kid will have one, so we'll get like 30 or 40 at a time. Sometimes if we have 2 shows in a school, after between shows, I'll come back and I'll see at my table there'll be a stack of some that a teacher left for me/us, and the cast loves them, especially since there was one that I remember that I think was with Christmas Carol that it was signed "Your Enjoyer" and then the kid's name. I was it's just things like that are adorable. And so we get them, we pass them around, and sometimes the actors will be like, I want to keep this one or I want to keep that one, and we keep them in the vans, and people like to look at them. It puts a smile on their face.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
It's that community outreach kind of because you're literally in their school. We have about 8 more minutes. I know that Cheryl wants to talk about our staff, and then I know Erin has a few questions from the chat, and then we'll wrap it up. Cheryl?
Oh, great. Thank you, Katrina. Yeah, one of the things we were discussing and what I realized is there have been close to 50 stage managers who've been part of the McCarter team over my 26 years. Because of our apprentice program, the stage management apprentices each year work on the production. But every equity stage manager that has been on the production is a McCarter alumni who has experienced McCarter's Christmas Carol from the intern or apprentice point of view. I can't let this panel go by without mentioning the importance of my peer, Allison Coate, who I've worked with for 24 seasons. And she was a major part of the collaborative team when we put together, she started in 1996 on the show, but in 2000 and then in 2016, she was instrumental in bringing the production together. So I have to make sure that is verbalized. McCarter's staff is incredibly proud of the production, and everybody owns their piece of the production, and that's how we get the finest work out of everyone each year. Now, our stage management team is 6 people, which, listening to Talia and Rafi, that probably kind of blows your mind a little bit, but there is the equity stage manager who runs the deck, who handles all the logistics of the setting up and running the rehearsal hall, maintaining the paperwork. Allison, as I said, created the original paperwork that we run the show off of, and it's created knowing we've got to run the show off of this paperwork probably for a decade. They directly manage the crew of 17. We have 23 people that run the show, each performance. It's a crew and management team of 23. And another main role of the equity stage manager is to make sure I'm enjoying every moment of the process. They must be inspiring, uplifting, and adored by our production staff, and they need to deeply understand the culture of the production and McCarter Theater. Now, our stage management assistant, which is filled by our stage management apprentice each year, they are actually the one that maintains the blocking book. I will do the blocking book the first year of a production, and then it's delegated. So each year our stage management apprentice is in charge of the blocking book, and they assist the equity stage manager in all their duties and run stage right. Now, the stage management apprentice has to be inspiring for me to teach and mentor. They have to be way better at technology than I am, and they want to be a person that I can learn from as well. So because we have such a big company on Adam's version of Christmas Carol, on this version we added the role of a community ensemble manager. They are not on headset. The community ensemble manager the first 3 years was a stage management alumni, Allison Hassman, who was Philadelphia based. But last season, when Allie moved into the equity stage manager role, our community ensemble manager was actually a past directing assistant and engagement assistant. So community ensemble manager can either be from the stage management world, the directing world, or engagement world in our current production. We have a young ensemble manager, obviously, that manages the children. And for about 15 years, we had 2 stage management interns, but we have reorganized our intern program into an apprentice program, and we have many less apprentices. We used to have 12, now we have 6. So the young ensemble manager role has actually turned into a fully salaried staff position. Let me say, as is the community ensemble manager. That's a non-equity position, and it's a staff position for the run of Christmas Carol that's salaried. Because I know this is a big discussion in the stage management world right now in terms of how theaters can make these entry-level positions more of a full salaried position. And that was a big step that McCarter has taken over the past few years. We also have a volunteer rehearsal assistant. I started a program 3 years ago at McCarter Theater to address getting our artistic interns off of being on book during the tech and preview process. So we found that our community ensemble managers on Christmas Carol very much wanted to get involved with the productions at McCarter throughout the season. So we have this volunteer rehearsal assistant program. On almost every show that we do at McCarter, I offer up the opportunity. And if someone comes to me and says, I want to do it, but I'm only available 80% of the time, we work within that. Because basically their main duty is being on book. And then they can, if they want to be further involved, we create more tasks for them. But we create things in a way that if they have to miss a rehearsal, we're not running at a deficit. So this is the first year we had a volunteer rehearsal assistant on Christmas Carol, a young man, I think he's in his early 20s from Trenton, New Jersey, who really wanted to be involved in the process. And it was sort of a revelation for me in terms of growing as a supervisor. And I think the transformation in him as an emerging theater artist was amazing. And this is something that we're talking about a lot in a lot of our stage management roundtables that we've been having. But he might not become a stage manager, but he goes back into his community. And I know he is influencing a lot of young children in elementary and middle school. He works at a private charter school as a teaching assistant, and I know he's influencing them. And I feel that community outreach is the way to bring up young people in middle school and high school to know that there are other places in the arts to pursue other than just the obvious directing and acting. So that is the structure of our team. You might ask what I do. I would say I'm a scheduling goddess. I'm a cruise director. I orchestrate the process. I have to make sure the director and the collaborators and the production staff are having a wonderful time and not getting pissed off, making their life easier. I actually run sound in the rehearsal hall because the rest of the stage management staff is on their feet during run-throughs. So running the sound falls on me during the rehearsal hall process. I call the show and I give a lot of backstage tours, and I host close to 50 booth guests throughout our run. We can handle 2 booth guests who sit on headset and can listen to the show being called. That's something we've used for our young ensemble parents. We invite them up into the booth because we want to give them an inside view. I will say that through booth guesting, we have cultivated young ensemble parents into major donors, and some of them have even become the president of our board. So it is not something I don't recognize, that every parent we bring in could become a potential future volunteer or future donor at the theater. We also use booth guesting to educate young emerging stage managers, college students, and we invite the staff of the theater who are not in the production department to sit up in the booth on headset, because I feel it's really important for the development assistant or the head of marketing or our house manager or the person in the finance office to understand how a production runs and feel like they're inside of it. I feel that helps them in their desk job and reinvigorates them. Thanks, Katrina.
Thank you, Cheryl. I love how engaged you are with your community. We have time for one more question. Erin, can you tell us what that question is?
Yeah, it was wondering about, if things are changed from year to year, is there any time that it's caused a problem when they go to change something?
Alden, since every year is treated like a new production.
No. I mean, if the director wants to totally change the blocking, sometimes it affects scene transitions, and we have to remind them what his parameters are. But no, not really. No.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We've just gone slightly over. I just want to everyone applaud for our 4 panelists. So much experience. I know we could have talked for another hour and a half. If you are still reliving the holidays, we have an event tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern? 2 p.m. Eastern, which is talking about pantos, which is a English tradition that I've actually know nothing about. So I'm super looking forward to that. And then on Sunday, we're ending it with
Saturday,
July 25th. We're ending it with Sleighs and Trains, The Journey to Santa, and we're going to talk about the Polar Express and Santaland at Macy's in New York. And we have a Santa joining us, and that is at 8 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. But thank you to our panelists. Thank you for everyone for coming. And what is it that Scrooge says at the end of Christmas Carol? I have never done the show, so I don't actually know this.
Tiny Tim says,
God bless us, everyone.
God bless us, everyone. Thank you.
Be healthy and safe, everyone.
Amy.
Bye. Thank you. Happy Christmas in July.